The sea gives, and the sea takes. For Isao Tanaka, a third-generation fisherman off Yonaguni's coast, this was daily truth. But on that March morning, in 1985, the sea gave something that defied all logic. His net, cast into the deep channel known as the Dragon's Throat, hauled up more than mackerel. Among the flapping silver, a dark shape thumped onto the deck. Not coral, not driftwood, a statue, carved from dense, blackened timber. Its surface was worn, smooth, by centuries of currents. Yet the details remained shockingly precise. Elongated limbs, a face with wide, empty eyes, and an open mouth, frozen mid-word. It felt ancient, but not like any temple artifact Isao knew. It felt wrong. Superstition said objects from the deep trench carried the will of the drowned. Isao, a practical man, shoved it into his storage crate. A curiosity, nothing more. He didn't yet know he had just pulled up the first thread of a mystery that would unravel his sanity and lure scholars, priests, and ultimately the Japanese Coast Guard into a confrontation with something that slept below the waves. Isao kept the statue on a shelf in his cluttered living room, a conversation piece for drinking buddies. Then one rainy Tuesday, his wife Chio noticed something impossible. There were two. The original stood where Isao left it, but beside it sat a second, nearly identical figure. The wood was similar, but the carving was crisper, the expression more pronounced. The same open-mouthed plea, now edged with something like urgency. No one had visited. The doors had been locked. Isao, thinking a neighbor's prank, questioned the village. The response was uneasy silence. Then, a hesitant confession from the Fujita family up the coast. They too had found a statue, and theirs had also duplicated. A chilling pattern emerged. The dolls didn't copy themselves randomly. The replica always appeared closer to the family's tokonoma, the household Shinto altar, as if trying to communicate through the home's spiritual focal point. The sea hadn't just given a strange artifact. It had initiated a replication protocol within their very homes. The physical duplication was merely the preamble. The true phenomenon began with sound. Chio Tanaka was the first to hear it. While preparing dinner, a sound seeped from the walls, not a voice, but a composite of many whispers, layered over the deep, resonant groan of water pressure. It was wordless at first, a surge of desperate sound. Then, over days, it coalesced into a looping phrase, understood not through language, but implanted directly as meaning into the listener's mind. Return to the trench. The gate is cold. The gate is hungry. It repeated, growing in volume at night, unaffected by sealed windows or earplugs. Soon, every household with a statue reported the same auditory intrusion. The local priest, brought to perform a purification, heard it too, and left pale, murmuring about voices from before gods. The whispers weren't a request. They were a system notification, a repeating error message from a place that should have been silent. Defiance had consequences. Isao, frustrated by the whispers, decided on a direct solution. He took the two statues, rowed his boat back to the approximate area of the find, and hurled them into the deep channel with a curse. That night, the whispers ceased. The relief was short-lived. The next morning, a replica statue sat on his doorstep, dry and carved from a different, darker wood. Its mouth was now a grim slash. Later that afternoon, as Isao repaired his roof, a single, perfectly secure clay tile dislodged. It fell with unnatural precision, striking his shoulder and sending him tumbling to the ground. The fracture was complex. He would never lift a net with that arm again. The village understood. Returning the statues was not enough. They had to be returned correctly, to the exact place. The entity, or system, was enforcing its rules with escalating, targeted precision. The Kodoki weren't gifts or curses. They were obligations with violent terms of service. News reached Dr. Kenji Sato, an anthropologist specializing in Ryukyuan folklore. He dismissed mass hysteria until he saw the statues. Their style defied categorization. Pre-Shinto, pre-Jomon even. Carbon dating placed the original found objects at over 10,000 years old, from a period when Yonaguni was part of a vast land bridge. His theory was radical. The statues weren't idols of worship, but containers. Ancient animist belief held that certain places, whirlpools, trenches, volcanic vents, were alive, or kami spirits of immense power. To interact with them, shamans carved vessels to hold a fragment of that consciousness, creating an interface. The trench kami had been dormant. The fishermen's nets, dragging through the depths, had accidentally activated these ancient interfaces, pulling them into the modern world. The replication. Whispers. It was the entity attempting to re-establish a broken connection, dragging its anchors back home through the only conduits it had, the statues and their keepers. Compelled by Dr. Sato's theory and the growing fear, the Coast Guard authorized a discreet hydrographic survey of the Dragon's Throat Trench. They expected a rocky seabed. What the side-scan sonar revealed was a shock that rippled through academic and governmental circles. At a depth of 45 meters, a massive, terraced stone structure emerged from the murk. It resembled the controversial Yonaguni monument, but more angular, more deliberately architectural. And around its base, the sonar registered anomalies. Dozens of small, dense objects, approximately 30 centimeters in size, were moving. Their trajectories weren't random. They traced patterns, converging on a central point at the structure's summit before dispersing, like ants around a nest. The technicians initially blamed instrument error, but the pattern repeated, scan after scan. The data suggested a horrifying conclusion. The statues on land were mere shadows. The active population, the true forms, were down there, moving purposefully in the crushing dark around a gateway that should not exist. The village, backed by Dr. Sato's research, made a decision. If the entity wanted its property back, they would comply, but on their terms, with ritual precision. They gathered every statue from the island, 23 in total. Sato, cross-referencing the sonar data and folkloric patterns of ancient ocean rituals, theorized the statues needed to be returned as a complete set, in a specific sequence mimicking the sonar movement pattern. The plan was a fusion of science and desperation. A nighttime voyage to the coordinates above the structure, where they would lower the statues in a weighted, sacred rope net, Shimenawa, in the exact order. It was not an exorcism, but a transaction. They hoped to close the loop, to satisfy the hungry gate. The atmosphere was taut. The whispers in the homes had risen to a constant, maddening drone, now clearly repeating the coordinates in numbers. The sea itself seemed to be guiding them to the ceremony. The ocean was unnaturally still that night, the water a black mirror holding the starless sky. No wind, no waves, a silence so profound it felt like a held breath. As the boat reached the sonar-marked epicenter, the surface tension broke, not with waves, but with light. A faint, bluish-green phosphorescence ignited below, outlining the colossal, terraced contours of the submerged monument. It was a bioluminescent bloom on a monumental scale, revealing what sonar could only hint at. The villagers watched, mesmerized and terrified, as the ghostly architecture sketched itself in cold fire 40 meters beneath their hull. The whispers stopped, the world reduced to the creak of the rope and the surreal glow. They began the lowering sequence, each statue descending into the radiant outline. The water accepted them without a splash. For a moment, there was only peace. The final statue had just left the net when the sea changed. The gentle glow from below intensified to a blinding, actinic blue. Then, at the heart of the submerged monument, the light collapsed inward. It wasn't an explosion, but an implosion of light, forming a perfect, absolute black disk against the radiant structure. A hole in reality. The water above it didn't swirl. It strained, as if being pulled into a vacuum. The net of statues, still descending, was snatched downward with impossible acceleration, vanishing into the void. A sound breached the surface, the deep sub-bass thrum that vibrated through the boat's hull and into the bones of the crew. It was the physical manifestation of the whispers, a frequency of pure, ancient hunger. The gate wasn't just cold, it was open, and it had taken its due. But the transaction, they realized too late, might have required more than just the statues. Returning to shore at dawn, the crew found a different island. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by the normal sounds of gulls and wind. The whispers had ceased in every home. But the resolution was not clean. In each house that had housed a Kodoki, a physical marker remained, a perfect circle of fine grayish silt, cool to the touch and smelling of anaerobic deep-sea mud and ozone. Nothing grew on these spots for months. More troubling were the psychological reports. Villagers no longer heard voices, but they dreamed. The same collective dream of a vast, dark pressure and a gate now satisfied, sleeping. Dr. Sato noted a final, bizarre detail. All electrical devices that recorded the event, the sonar tapes, a fisherman's cassette recorder on the boat, had their magnetic media irreversibly erased, as if scanned by a powerful, directed pulse. The evidence was now solely human, memory, and the strange circles of alien silt. Within a week, officials from Tokyo arrived. The story of mass hallucination triggered by geological gas leaks was crafted and disseminated. The Dragon's Throat Trench was declared a permanent marine scientific preservation zone, off limits to all vessels, citing unstable tectonic activity. Satellite monitoring was established. Dr. Sato's research was quietly classified. The villagers, offered generous fishing subsidies for different grounds, chose silence. The state's reaction confirmed the true scale of the fear. This wasn't a local ghost story. The sonar data, the erased tapes, the synchronized psychological effects. It pointed to a phenomenon with measurable physical power, an intelligence interacting with our world through archaic protocols. The gate was closed, but its existence was now a cold, bureaucratic fact, buried not under water, but under red tape and official denial. Generations later, the mystery of the Kodoki is a campfire tale on Yonaguni. Yet, fragments persist. Fishermen who stray near the exclusion zone sometimes get sonar ghosts, brief, dense returns that move against the currents before fading. Every few years, a child on the island is born with what elders call trench dreams, vivid nightmares of the glowing structure and the hum. Dreams they can describe in identical detail without ever hearing the old stories. Most chillingly, on the anniversary of the night voyage, the circles of silt in the old homes, long since cleaned, sometimes reappear, damp and smelling of the deep, for a single night. It suggests the transaction of 1985 was not a finale, but a handshake. A connection was established. The gate is sleeping, but it is aware. And protocols, once initiated by ancient shamans and accidentally reactivated by modern nets, may still be running in the background, waiting for the next trigger or the next time the gate grows hungry. In 2008, a duo of rogue oceanographers from a private institute, fueled by leaked fragments of Sato's report, mounted an illegal dive. Their goal was not to retrieve, but to observe, to document the gate with shielded analog film cameras. They descended into darkness, their lights cutting through the void, until the massive step pyramid materialized. It was covered in thick, unknown bioluminescent biofilm that pulsed rhythmically, like a slow heartbeat. At the summit, they found it, a circular indentation, now sealed with what appeared to be a seamless plug of black basalt. But it wasn't inert. As they approached, their digital depth gauges and comms filled with the same familiar multi-voice whisper, digitally translated in real time by their recorder into a chilling phrase: "Inventory complete. Stand by." Before they could surface, a sudden, powerful downward current, absent on all hydrological maps, slammed them against the structure. One diver's mask cracked on the ancient stone. They barely escaped. Their analog film, once developed, showed only blinding static for the frames aimed at the gate itself. A shard of the black material, chipped off during the rogue dive, became the most controversial sample in modern geology. Its composition was primarily basalt, but its crystalline structure was impossible. Under an electron microscope, it revealed a perfect, non-repeating quasi-crystalline pattern, a structure previously only created in labs and found in certain meteorites. It was a material that could not form under Earth's natural geological processes. Furthermore, it exhibited a weak but measurable diamagnetic field, repelling magnetic force in a way that suggested it was actively maintaining its form against immense pressure. Dr. Kenji Sato, now retired and speaking anonymously, theorized this wasn't a plug, but a seal or a lock. The quasi-crystal structure acted as a cryptographic key, a physical algorithm. The statues, he posited, were the biological component, carriers of specific resonant patterns, perhaps DNA or psychic imprints of the ancient shamans, required to temporarily deactivate this lock. The fishermen hadn't just pulled up statues. They had pulled out the living keys. The Yonaguni data, once cross-referenced by a clandestine international research group, revealed a terrifying pattern. The sonar frequencies emitted by the structure before the gate opened matched anomalous acoustic signatures recorded in other oceanic mystery zones. A specific, ultra-low frequency pulse in the Bermuda Triangle, a matching magnetic distortion pattern in the Devil's Sea near Japan. Plotted on a geomagnetic map, these points formed nodes of a subtle, planet-spanning grid. The theory, known as the telluric interface hypothesis, suggested places like the Dragon's Throat weren't random. They were specific points where the Earth's crust was thinnest, or its magnetic field aligned in a way that allowed interaction with another layer of reality, a substrate, or a parallel biosphere. The Kodoki event wasn't unique. It was a localized breach of a global system. The gates were always there, mostly dormant. Our world was merely the surface layer. In 2015, an anonymous package arrived at a major news outlet. It contained a degraded VHS tape. The speaker, his voice digitally altered, identified himself as part of the 1985 data analysis team. He claimed the official sonar readings were heavily edited. The raw data showed not just moving dots, but a clear, organized exchange. The statues from the surface were absorbed into the gate. In return, over the following 48 hours, different shapes, larger, more complex, exited the gate and dispersed into the deep Pacific. The implication was monstrous. It wasn't just a return, it was a trade. The village had unknowingly provided activation energy, the statues, keys, and, in return, the entity had sent something out into our world's oceans. The whistleblower ended with a warning. The periodic sonar ghosts, reported by fishermen, are not echoes. They are patrols. The things that came out are still down there, moving in the trenches. And their number, according to the raw data, was 23. The most compelling modern evidence came from an unlikely source, a publicly funded oceanic research vessel studying thermal vents in the Philippine Trench, thousands of kilometers away. Their ROV, Abyss Watcher, was monitoring a vent field when its lights caught a movement. Something colossal glided at the extreme edge of visibility. The spectral analysis of the brief footage matched the unique bioluminescent signature from the Yonaguni structure. The shape was not a whale, not a squid. It was geometric, rigid, moving with silent, purposeful momentum against the fierce deep-sea currents. Before the ROV could pivot, all its sensors spiked with electromagnetic interference and the feed cut. When restored, the thing was gone. The official log listed a technical fault and possible large debris flow, but the raw data packet, later hacked and leaked, contained a final, clean sonar ping. The object's profile matched no known shipwreck or geological formation. It matched the approximate size and shape of one of the terraced levels of the Yonaguni monument. A piece of the gate was mobile. Beyond geology and acoustics lies the most controversial field, parapsychology. Researchers studying the trench dreamers, the children born with the inherited memory, made a breakthrough. EEG scans during these dreams showed unprecedented synchronization of theta waves across all subjects, regardless of location. They were literally sharing a neural frequency while dreaming of the gate. This led to the PC connection theory. The original shamans didn't just carve statues. They performed a ritual to imprint a part of their consciousness into the wood, using specific resonant frequencies, perhaps from chanting or drumming. The statues were psychic batteries, tuned receivers. When modern humans, genetically linked to those ancient bloodlines, came into prolonged contact with the statues, the dormant, psychomorphic field reactivated. The whispers weren't auditory hallucinations. They were direct, psychic data packets, a desperate download from a failing ancient system into the nearest available biological hardware, the villagers' own minds. A subtle but profound change marks the younger generation on Yonaguni. Many of those born after 1985, particularly descendants of the original affected families, exhibit what psychologists call shared nonverbal affinity. They are not autistic, but they often communicate complex ideas among themselves with minimal words, using glances and subtle gestures with uncanny accuracy. Some show a peculiar aversion to deep, resonant sounds, like certain Buddhist temple bells or ship foghorns, frequencies that match the sonar pulse of the structure. A few have even demonstrated a weak but measurable ability to influence random number generators, a classic test for psychokinesis. When in a meditative state focused on the sea, it's as if the brief psychic connection their ancestors suffered left a permanent, low-level channel open in their genome. They are the first generation of a new, quiet humanity, unconsciously tuned to a frequency born in a trench, carrying the silent legacy of the gate in their very neurology. Consolidating all the data, geological, acoustic, psychological, a unified, terrifying theory has emerged among the few cleared to see the full picture. The Yonaguni Monument and its sister sites across the globe are not gates in a simple sense. They are filters, or dimensional reducers. Their purpose is to translate entities or information from a higher dimensional or vastly different state of reality into a form that can exist in our physical, three-dimensional world. The statues were the perfectly tuned avatars or containers for this process. In 1985, the net didn't just retrieve statues. It damaged the filter. The entity on the other side, panicking at the loss of its interface units, initiated a recovery protocol. The whispers, the accidents, and a temporary exchange, sending out its own simpler constructs. The filter is now repaired, but altered. It's aware of us. We are no longer just neighbors separated by rock and water. We are two systems that have performed a handshake. The question is no longer what is it, but what did the handshake protocol initiate, and when is the next data transfer scheduled? A knowledge of the filter presents civilization with its first post-contact ethical crisis. One faction, led by defense and scientific sectors, advocates for active probing. Their argument, understanding the protocol, is paramount to planetary security. They propose deploying non-metallic, silent drones to map the structure with LiDAR and passive sensors, seeking the source code of the interface. The opposition, a coalition of ethicists, neuroscientists, and Ryukyuan cultural custodians, argues this is catastrophic hubris. The 1985 event proved the system is reactive and enforces rules. Unauthorized probing could be interpreted as a hostile intrusion, triggering a defensive response we cannot comprehend, perhaps a full-scale activation of the global grid. They advocate for permanent, monitored quarantine, treating the site like a super-contagious archaeological dig. The dilemma is Faustian. Do we risk awakening a sleeping intelligence for knowledge, or live forever next to a locked door, knowing something is listening on the other side? Covertly, a black-budget research initiative began, Project Resonance. They recruited adult trench dreamers, individuals whose brains still broadcast the theta wave signature. The goal was not communication, but passive monitoring, using their minds as organic antennas tuned to the filter's frequency. The initial results were unsettling. When placed in sensory deprivation near large bodies of water, the dreamers didn't just visualize the monument. Their EEGs began outputting complex, non-random data streams. Decoded by AI, these streams contained fluctuating numeric values, countdowns, inventories, status reports in a base 23 mathematics system. The dreamers were unknowingly receiving the filter's operational telemetry. Most chilling was a consistent data point translating as synchronization window, which cycled on a predictable 19-year lunar solar calendar. The next window was calculated for late 2024. The filter wasn't just on standby, it was operating on a precise celestial schedule. Efforts to reverse engineer the physical evidence repeatedly hit a wall of material science. The silt circles contained microscopic grains of elements with anomalous isotopic ratios, variants that do not occur naturally on Earth, but are theorized to exist under extreme gravitational pressure, like near a neutron star. The quasi-crystal of the plug defied all attempts at synthesis. Our manufacturing processes could copy its shape, but not its inherent, stable, diamagnetic field, which seemed to be powered by zero-point energy at a quantum level. This led to a humbling conclusion. The filter isn't just a structure in our reality. It is an anchor point, a knot tying two incompatible sets of physical laws together. Its components are manufactured from a physics we don't yet understand. Studying it is like a 2D drawing, trying to comprehend a 3D printer. We can see its shadow in our world, but its true substance exists partially outside our dimensional constraints. On January 17th, 2023, at 03:23 UTC, a phenomenon dubbed the global quieting occurred. For exactly 23 seconds, every sensitive instrument monitoring the planet's vital signs, seismographs, deep-sea hydrophones, magnetometers, recorded a cessation of background noise. The Earth's magnetic field didn't fluctuate. It went perfectly, unnaturally static. Tectonic microtremors ceased. Oceanic ambient sound vanished. It was as if the planet itself was put on mute. The epicenter of this silencing effect was traced not to a single point, but spatially corresponded to the nodes of the hypothesized global grid, with Yonaguni showing the strongest effect. The official explanation was a rare global atmospheric-ionospheric coupling event. The internal report from Project Resonance suggested otherwise. It was a system ping. The filter, with the intelligence behind it, conducted a passive scan of its entire network, checking the integrity of all nodes, including our biosphere, which registers as ambient noise on its sensors. We were scanned, and we likely didn't meet the criteria for a response. This time, the 2023 quieting was followed by actionable intelligence. Enhanced satellite-based gravimetry and sea surface temperature analysis detected a series of subtle anomalies. Massive, cold objects moving at constant speed along the seafloor, following the tectonic trenches. They were converging. The whistleblower's claim was horrifically validated. The things traded in 1985 were mobile, They had been dispersed across the world's ocean trenches for decades. And now, in response to the system ping, or in anticipation of the upcoming synchronization window, they were returning to home base. Humanity had crossed a point of no return. This was no longer archaeology or parapsychology. It was a strategic repositioning of non-human assets. The deep ocean, our planet's final frontier, was now a theater of operations for an intelligence with a 10,000-year-old contingency plan in the face of silent mobilization. World powers enacted the unprecedented Yonaguni Protocol. It is not a plan for attack, but for observation and non-provocative containment. A multinational flotilla of silent, non-magnetic research vessels is set to establish a wide perimeter during the next synchronization window, October 2024. Their orders: record everything with passive sensors, make no active transmissions, deploy no hardware into the water column. The goal is to witness the process, to understand the filter's purpose during a full activation cycle. Simultaneously, a cultural and genetic archive of the Yonaguni population, especially the dreamers, is being preserved off-world in a lunar data vault. It is an admission of profound vulnerability. We are preparing to witness an event that could range from a harmless cosmic weather pattern to a planetary scale reset. And our best strategy is to be quiet, watch, and ensure a backup of what makes us human exists elsewhere. On the island, life continues with a heavy awareness. The older generation, like Isao, has passed, taking their first-hand terror to the grave. The middle generation lives with the bureaucratic shadow of the exclusion zone. But for the young dreamers, like Kaito, the connection is different. He describes it not as fear, but as a deep gravitational homesickness for a place he's never been. The crushing, silent world of the trench. His dreams have shifted from static images to clear visions of the 23 mobile assets settling into grooves around the monument, like keys in a colossal lock, humming in unison. He feels the rising harmonic. He knows with unshakable certainty that the window is not an invasion. It's a diagnostic. The filter is checking the integrity of its connection to this reality. And the trade of 1985 was it acquiring the necessary biological and cultural data, us, to run the test. We are not the operators. We are the test subjects. The leading theory for the upcoming window is a full system diagnostic. The filter and the intelligence it serves may exist on time scales where millennia are seconds. The 1985 breach was a minor fault. The returning assets are repair drones. During the window, the reactivated monument will likely emit a multi-spectrum scan, gravimetric, genetic, psychic, to assess the state of this reality layer since the last check. Potentially tens of thousands of years ago, it will catalog changes. The rise of human civilization, our technology, our pollution, our nuclear signatures, our electromagnetic noise. The outcome is unknown. It could be indifference. It could be a quarantine protocol if we're deemed a corrosive agent. Or, in the most hopeful scenario, it could be an update where the filter subtly adjusts Earth's systems, climate, tectonics, to optimize for the continuity of the biosphere it's tasked with monitoring. An ancient planetary maintenance routine. We are awaiting a report card from a god that is also a machine. In the shadow of the unknown, humanity's most profound act has been one of preservation. The Lunar Archive, named the Legacy, is not just a backup. It is a message. It contains our science, our art, our failures, and our hopes. It includes the complete genomic data of the Yonaguni dreamers, the sonar maps, the quasi-crystal analysis, the full story of our encounter with the filter. The capsule is designed to survive for 1,000,000 years. The implicit hope is twofold. First, that some future version of humanity or another intelligence will find it if we fall silent. Second, and more secretly, that the filter itself, during its diagnostic, might detect this deliberate act of self-cataloging and recognize it not as noise, but as sentience, a conscious attempt at communication from a young species, suddenly aware it is not alone in its own house, reaching out to the silent landlord in the basement. And so we wait by the shore, the sea which has been our womb, our larder, and our mystery, now hides a junction box between realities. The story of the Kodoki Statues is not a ghost story with an ending. It is a prologue. It is the moment humanity, through a fisherman's net, accidentally brushed against the underlying firmware of its own world and received a notification. We have spent decades trying to decode the error message, fortify our firewalls, and understand the system administrator. Now, the clock ticks toward what may be a routine update or an existential audit. Whatever happens during the window, one truth is now inescapable. Our reality is structured, monitored, and has purposes beyond our comprehension. We are not the architects of this world. We are its tenants. And in October 2024, the landlord is scheduled to check in. All we can do is watch the horizon, listen to the dreamers, and hope that when the deep hum rises from the trench once more, it is the sound of a system passing its diagnostic, not the sound of it formatting the drive.